Welcome in, everyone. I'm SquishableMoon, your shooting star with a ranch addiction and fewer brain cells than the common garden snail, and welcome back to my channel. At this point, if you're a fan of my channel and my content, you probably know about my Forgotten Mark Syndrome AU. Forgotten Mark Syndrome is an imaginary illness I made up for My Little Pony universe based off of a real illness. The illness is called Cub-Gras Syndrome. Cub-Gras Syndrome is an illness that is a psychological disorder where someone believes their friends and family members have been replaced by identical imposters. Forgotten Mark Syndrome is an illness that somebody gets by being bit by an unreformed changeling. The venom makes them believe their cutie mark or friend's cutie mark have been replaced by another person's cutie mark. I like to think this series has been pretty good so far, and the fact that it hasn't been too scary. I feel like there was a lot of elements that I could have done to make it scarier. But I don't know about you guys, but the infection AU videos on TikTok keep me up at night because I refuse to watch them during the day and always end up watching them right before bed. A lot of them can be pretty terrifying. I ended up making the series not very scary, mainly because I wanted people to be able to enjoy it without being so scared that they can't sleep at night. But with that being said, I still want to make more scary videos, and this is going to be the bad ending of my AU for the Twilight video. That being said, this video is going to have darker themes such as gore and violence against My Little Pony characters. If you are not in a good mental state, I do recommend watching a different video, or coming back at a later date when you're in a better mental state. A reminder that everything in this video is fictional and never happened in my AU. This is not a canonical ending. This is just a bad ending that could have happened but is not going to happen. Do not worry, your favorite My Little Pony character will never die truly in my AUs. I hope with that being said, you enjoy the rest of the video. Twilight Sparkle was the first to become infected in my AU by Forgotten Mark Syndrome. Not only that, but Twilight was also the one who fused her mind with Queen Chrysalis to try and find a cure. And that's where our bad ending in this AU starts. Twilight's body began to change in the most horrific of ways. Her legs started to elongate and her skin started to stretch. Her fur was pulled tight against her muscle, pulling on her bones whenever she moved. In the first few weeks, she could barely walk by herself, choosing to spend most of her time laying down in her bed instead of walking anywhere. Of course, her friends would come to visit her from time to time, but throughout most of the day, she was alone in her bed, reading books and doing research. As the weeks passed, her skin started to rot in specific areas, turning into holes. The fur and the muscle and skin would erode, and the large holes would form in its wake. Not only was her body changing in weird and odd ways she wasn't accustomed to, but her mind was turning into shreds of its former self, not being able to quite take hold of Queen Chrysalis's memories. It started with the small stuff, covering mirrors, avoiding glass, and anything to avoid her own reflection. But it escalated to something more over time, snapping at her friends and finding their company annoying. But why was she finding their company annoying? She had never found it annoying before. Twilight was holding in her room, studying as much as she could about friendship. The more she studied, the more her body eroded over time, until she had an idea that she wasn't the crazy one. It was her friends who were crazy. Something was wrong with her friends, and she needed to fix it. The last time she could remember getting along with them was before their cutie marks had changed. In her mind, that had to have been the reason they were falling apart, and why their friendship wasn't the way it used to be. Over their months, her friends grew more and more worried, seeing her stretch and unsightly appearance. Talking to her seemed to do little to no good, making Twilight more upset than anything. After time, they couldn't even get in the castle to see her and were forced to wait for word from Spike. What her friends didn't know is Twilight was planning something sinister. On one quiet afternoon, she put her plan into action. Using her magic, she sent an urgent letter to each of her friends, telling them to come to her castle immediately. The first to arrive was Rainbow Dash and Applejack, followed by Pinkie, Rarity, and of course Fluttershy, each out of breath and running and flying full sprint in the darkness to her castle. Twilight's height had far surpassed any of theirs, and now she towered above them all. She was skinny and almost looked frail as she walked into view. Her muzzle now sprouted 2 large fangs that stuck out of her mouth, and her eyes glowed in the dim light of her castle. Ever since she was bit by the unreformed changeling, she hated having direct light of any kind, turning her castle into a cave that was very dimly lit to make her feel more comfortable. She lured her friends down into the basement of her castle and started to show them all of the paperwork and research she had done, clues that led to having the wrong cutie marks all along. Twilight tried to explain to them that their cutie marks were incorrect and that they needed to replace them immediately. Her friends, of course, tried to console Twilight and let her know that they did in fact have the correct cutie marks. Twilight had expected this outcome, and that's why she prepared a potion that she got from Zecora. She had visited Zecora the night before and asked for a very strong sleeping potion to help her sleep at night. Smashing the potion onto the ground, her friends inhaled the potion and the effects quickly hit as they dropped to the floor. Using their sleeping bodies to her advantage, she tied them to tables facing one another in a circular room. After a couple hours, her friends awoke to the horror of being tied to the table. The tables were lifted in a way so they could all see each other, and Twilight walked back into the room, holding a large tray of medical items. Scalpels, syringe, and bandages were lying on top. Among the medical supplies was a simple notebook and pen. Her friends asked what she was doing, and Twilight stayed quiet until sitting in the middle of the room. Twilight explained that their cutie marks had in fact been switched, and she needed to put them back on the right ponies. She explained that each of them would have to explain how they got their cutie mark and why it was their special talent. If they couldn't convince her, she would scalpel off their cutie mark and place it on the table. Each of her friends would fail to explain their cutie mark and why it was their special talent, leading Twilight to cut it off and place it on the table. Of course, Twilight wasn't a monster. She made sure to give them numbing injections so they couldn't feel anything, and though they were awake while doing this, they would be pain-free. Once she was finished taking the cutie marks from her friends, she would place them on the ponies she thought were supposed to have them. Once she was finished putting the cutie marks back on the pony, she unlocked her friends from the table and expected them to greet her warm and affectionately. After all, she had just replaced their cutie marks with the correct ones. They should be happy, shouldn't they? However, she was met with nothing but curse words and sobs. Applejack tackled Twilight to the ground, pinning her to the floor, while Rainbow Dash escaped the room to go get Princess Celestia. In the end, Twilight was turned to stone. Celestia and her friends didn't have the heart to execute her, and her castle was closed off to the public. The group of friends were able to get their real cutie marks put back on their bodies, but their scars were a reminder that the illness was far from gone. That's the basis of the idea I had. I wanted Twilight to be so convinced that her cutie marks had been robbed from her friends that she had to put them on the correct bodies, not realizing they were on the correct bodies all along. I feel like in a lot of ways this is very similar to creepypastas or creepy My Little Pony stories that are out there. I like to think that this also fits into the Cupcakes universe with Pinkie Pie, because I feel like if Pinkie Pie was bitten by an unreformed changeling and got forgotten mark syndrome, she herself would try to give her friends the cutie marks back that she thought were taken from them. But yeah, with that being said, this is just a bad ending. It's not the true ending. All of the endings in the original Forgotten Mark Syndrome are happy, everyone's fine. They end up finding a cure, everyone's hunky-dory. So don't take this video as the true ending. This is just what could have happened as a result of the bad ending. I just thought it would be more interesting to have good endings and bad endings. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I had much fun making it. Until next time, guys, I hope all your dreams come true. Bye-bye.